Batty started on some changes that would make life a little better. He moved the dumping stockpile closer to the front door of the cave, saving himself from excessive walking to and fro. Then he set up a horseshoes pin just outside so he could allow himself a few recreational breaks. He decided to supplement his hunting by stealing fresh kills left on the ground by the local predators. An ibex doe was the first, which a cougar had left laying relatively close by. A traveller called Bautista passed by, but she and Batty pointedly ignored each other. It felt like maybe a missed opportunity, but what was he to do? Capture her? A lucky event occurred. Some broken spaceship parts landed in the valley. Batty dismantled them. These bits of wreckage provided just the parts he was needed for his generator. He was much happier dismantling machinery than he was mining steel out of walls. But he had nothing for the generator to power just yet. The hut was only half finished and didn't have any lighting or cooling systems yet. There was so much work to be done and only one man to do it all. Invariably, he kept finding that one task couldn't be done until another was completed, and something else before that, and so on. Meat was starting to rot in the warmth of the cave, so Batty stepped up his efforts to hunt small wildlife. There was rice too, so he was not going to starve anytime soon. To keep food for longer periods, he planned to run a cooler and a light in the hut. It would make a good cold store. More spaceship parts crashed while he slept. While he was still living in the cave, it was getting uncomfortably warm in summertime with a campfire burning. He made a small passive cooler to keep the temperature down a bit. He made a proper bed at last. No more uncomfortable sleeping on the floor. Thinking ahead, he would make a small room next to the cold store, probably a kitchen. It was so small, he finished it quite quickly and roofed it over. Finally, the hut was complete apart from the cooler, which needed steel. It also needed a roof, but that was the last job. He began more of his least favourite activity, mining steel from the cave wall. Whilst doing this, he wondered if he could eat the fungi growing in the cave. One day we'll have a wind turbine to provide us with power, more constant since we keep letting the little wood generator run out of fuel. It's a waste running it, we don't have anything for it to power yet. A heat wave struck, with temperatures up to 50 degrees Celsius likely. That's over 120 Fahrenheit for those Americans and those old timers over here. Today wasn't quite that bad, but foggy rain at 37 Celsius made everything more arduous. He completed the room cooler and refueled the generator. He was aiming for -10 Celsius, but that's under normal weather conditions. In this heat, it might be the only place that would be pleasantly cool. A strange turn of events. We received a message that there is a starship hidden on the planet. I really don't know how this translates into the in-game world, to be honest. He was naked, he has no radio or phone. Never mind, it's what the game sends you shortly after every start. Anyway, it could be our way out of here, but it is very distant, so something to remember for later, much later. In the meantime, a wild man wandered in, Veli. Really good at crafting, a dab hand at fighting hand to hand, and mining. Interest in animals and medical. On the downside, an annoying voice, too smart and asthmatic. But apparently Batty doesn't have the skill to tame him. Batty played horseshoes to relax and thought about the wild man. He finished the hut. Now the cooler could start bringing the temperature down inside. Then another wild person, this time a woman called Blue, a little artistic and good with plants, with interests in plants and mining, but she's a pyromaniac. We of course haven't got the skill to tame her either. If we can't tame, Can we maybe arrest? The room next to the cooler is unused currently. If a sleeping spot were prepared, maybe we could get Veli back there as a prisoner and try to convince him to join. Well, he won't come quietly. Apparently Batty's method of arresting him was to exchange pleasantries. You're too nice, Batty. However, Veli is now angry and chases Batty. Batty runs indoors, switches to a club, we don't want to kill the poor guy with arrows, turns and faces him in the doorway. They fight. The fight goes on way too long for a guy with a club versus a naked guy with no weapons, but eventually Veli is down. Batty dragged him into the small jail. Batty had a number of cracks from Veli's strong fists. First, he tended to his own injuries. Veli had a number of cracks from Batty's club. They weren't going to kill him, so Batty re-equipped his bow and went to sleep. The plan was going to be to reduce Veli's resistance but treat him well, so after a time he could maybe join the Bat colony. Batty had no medicine, so it was a top priority to harvest the heal root growing outside. He planned to divide the cave still further, so that the stored foods were kept cooler than the room with the campfire. Obviously in the long run the food would go into the cold store. He fed Veli the next morning, had his own breakfast, harvested some healwort, and brought the herbal medicine indoors, then returned to bed to heal. Then, at the worst possible moment, a raid. A man called Kiyoshi had appeared right by the southern door of Batty's cave. He had a knife and knew how to use it. He was a nimble 50-year-old. Charmingly, he was also a psychopath. He was also hopped up on smoke leaf. Batty felt he was in no condition to take him on. His bow skills were still poor, and this time he had a crop of bruises to slow him down. He didn't have the advantage of the better mobility, unlike when he'd faced Red Barrow. It would be humiliating, but he would have to hide and hope Kiyoshi didn't cause too much damage before he decided to leave. But what about Veli? Would Kiyoshi kill him or free him? This was a very bad situation. Going for the most valuable items first, Kiyoshi set fire to Batty's new cooler. But then he destroyed the horseshoes pin, and that wasn't valuable at all. What was going on in the man's mind? Next he went on to start destroying the new generator. Batty took the opportunity to nip out and into the cooler room to douse the blaze. Having set the generator alight, Kiyoshi looked like he might be leaving. He was heading off to the northwest. Suddenly he turned back. He started breaking the cooler from the outside. Batty was standing just the other side of it in the room. Any moment they would be face to face. Batty ran out and into the cave just in time. Thankfully, Kiyoshi didn't seem inclined to beat down the door, returning to the cool room instead. A meteorite landed while all this was going on, lots of compacted steel, but survival first, okay? Kiyoshi set light to the lamp in the cool room and once more seemed to leave. Batty ran out and doused the flames yet again, but once again Kiyoshi returned. Batty ran back into the cave. The heat wave had finished, thankfully. Batty thought about his injuries. No, they were still slowing him down. He couldn't risk engaging the raider in combat. It would be certain to end up as a melee, which he would lose. Kiyoshi broke the lamp that he'd previously tried to burn, and left the area for a third time. This time he seemed to be going further. Yes, he really was leaving. In fact, he was heading for the insect cave. Surely not. But yes, he was going in. What a madman. Earlier, we noticed the insect-infested cave had been getting some attention from wildlife. A lynx killed a small megascarab, but was then killed by a big megaspider. Now, there was just the one megaspider left in the cave. A grizzly bear seemed to have been the latest to take them on. He was dead, but so were all of the other insects. Kiyoshi and the megaspider went toe to toe. It was a lengthy fight, but at the end Kiyoshi was dead. The mega spider had a stab wound in the heart, but apparently this was not going to kill it. Batty went out and extinguished the remaining fires. He surveyed the damage. The generator was gone, as were the cooler and lamp. There was a gaping hole in the wall of his cool room, cool no more. The damage wasn't extensive, but the loss of materials was a blow. It would take some time to gather enough steel and components to rebuild. Batty remembered to feed Veli. If somehow he could be persuaded to join, everything would start looking better. Unfortunately, Batty's cooking skills gave Veli food poisoning, not a good start. A solar flare occurred, shutting down all electrical devices. It was quite ironic really, since Kiyoshi had broken everything electrical that we owned. Sleep. He had survived another day. The experience had been humiliating and destructive, but he had lived through it. Some wayward cargo pods crashed, spilling a supply of chocolate. Blue was still wandering around the area and was getting awfully close to the mega spider cave. The mega spider was losing blood from its wounds, but still didn't seem any nearer death. Batty didn't particularly want Blue as a comrade. Inviting a pyromaniac in didn't seem to be the wisest move, whatever her skills, but besides, he couldn't cope with a second prisoner right now. One was quite enough. Batty decided not to rebuild the generator immediately. If he could get the wind turbine up and running, that would be better than a machine that had to be regularly fed with fuel. The cooler would have to return though. A cold store for food was essential. It was hard to get Batty's mind back to the regular tasks: food, building, gathering, looking after Veli, but he forced himself into a kind of routine. As he went to bed the following night, he could feel that his injuries were almost healed. Though mentally exhausted, Batty couldn't sleep. He woke in the middle of the night and ate raw food instead of cooking. He also fed the long-suffering Veli raw rice. He made the first attempt at reducing Veli's resistance. It was going to be a long process. Hunting needed to continue, but being very careful to keep away from the mega spider. He hadn't hunted squirrel since that first crazed one that tried to attack him. Thankfully, he killed this one with his second shot. Little improvements all the time. But as he slept that night, he couldn't help feeling that things had gone badly backwards in the last few days. He needed to start turning things around. He'd been stranded here for 18 days. Summer was about to end. Winter would be here all too soon.